Traders, how are you? Jimmy Neutron here. Doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have a lot of excess deaths now in Germany and the United States. If you remember one of the last videos I did, I talked about the ones in the UK and Australia. We have a Chinese spy balloon that's going over the US. And we even have the biggest a-hole in the world, Bill Gates, coincidentally being involved in the egg market. Let's go ahead and get started. Data this week showed that we have good data, good economic data, let's put it that way, when it came to the strong job growth in January, but that's not good data for what we want the central bank to do. Now, remember, if you guys are, little younger than I am, and you guys didn't live through the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis, that's basically when the system became what it is today, let's say. Around the world, governments dropped their interest rates at the lowest in recorded history, the history of the world, not the history of the US or the history of Germany, but the history of the world. So since the lowest interest rates in the history of the world caused this huge financial bubble, we are essentially overly dependent on the interest rates from the Fed, from the central bank, not only in the United States, which is still the largest economy in the world, but all of the economies around the world lowered their rates as well. So we're in a situation where we don't necessarily want really good economic data. And the reason why is because if we have really good economic data, like strong job growth that we had in January, that means that the Federal Reserve in the United States is less likely to stop raising rates or raise them in general. So if they continue raising rates, then the economy is continue to go into the rut, because since we live in this overly financialized economy, the higher the interest rates are, the less that we can buy stuff with. That's essentially what it means. So that's what happened this week. Now, overall for the week, the U.S. stock market's mostly positive. The Dow was the only one that was negative. Canada went up 0.32. Overseas market news, European markets mostly higher, with Russia being the most positive of all. In Latin America, we had the markets mostly mixed. The Bovespa in Brazil went down 3.5%. And then in Africa and the Middle East, mostly mixed, with Nigeria, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the largest economy in Africa, went up by just under 3%. In the far east, we have the Hang Seng in Hong Kong, mostly negative, and the Taiwan market's mostly positive. Bitcoin and other crypto news, not a lot of crypto news this week, other than the fact that Kazakhstan, which is a relatively unrecognized country in the US, a lot of us don't know where it is. It's basically in Central Asia, just below Russia. They passed a law to regulate Bitcoin. And Bitcoin continues on its upswing. It's up 1.46%, just under 23,000 so far this week. In commodities, last week we talked about the increase of the orange juice. Now, orange juice futures have hit a record high now, due to the fact that we had the hurricanes that knocked out a lot of the supply. In addition to that, the record winters. If we have freezing temperatures in Florida, for example, that literally kills the fruit on the trees. So now we have a supply squeeze, tongue twister, that's happening with the orange juice. Now, in the conspiracy news for the week, here comes Conspiracy Margello. Coincidentally, just completely by coincidence, 2013, the biggest a-hole in the world, Bill Gates invests in plant-based eggs, poultry, and meat. Oh, what a good investment. 2021, the biggest a-hole in the world, Bill Gates, becomes the largest private farmland owner in the United States. 2021, 2023, mass chicken and egg shortages hit American farms. And coincidentally now, the third largest egg farm, the third largest egg farm was hit by a huge fire. Over 100,000 hens went into flames. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. There's no way that they would intentionally do that to make eggs so expensive that you went out and bought plant-based eggs instead. Absolutely no way. Absolutely no way. Inflation is set to increase exponentially in 2023. Now that the Republicans controlling the House of Representatives are not going to allow the millions of barrels that are being dumped on the market from our reserve emergency supply that Biden has been doing over the last few years. And one of the things that I also thought, we got a huge show on conspiracies this week. This video, watch this video.
Just a quick update. It's Saturday, I believe, and here's the truck I've been driving for the last few days for Wilson Logistics. This trailer just was assigned to us from Kraft over at the Kraft Foods plant, and we're delivering it here to what's called the Springfield Underground. And that is, as you can see behind me, this giant cave that's big enough to house hundreds of these trucks and trailers. There's a train track running through here. Just to give you an idea, back here, there's a regular sized truck. See how tall that is up there?
So I don't know if you heard there at the end, he said there's a train track running through these underground bases. I think part of the problems that we're having with the prices, in addition to the shortages, even for example, the antibiotics, I think it's because the elites are sending everything to these underground bases for the end of the world. I could be wrong. But that's what the conspiracy says. U.S. natural gas. What do you guys think about that? You see the size of that bunker? U.S. natural gas futures are concluding in January with their second biggest monthly drop on record. Has to do with the warmer than expected winter that we had not only in the United States, but also in Europe. Oil fell to its lowest level in almost 3 weeks on Monday. Crude went down just under 9% to 73.39, and the Brent went down over 9% to just under, I didn't have the price there, so I can't give you guys the price. Sorry about that. The Brent is down over 20% now for the year. Gold and silver. Gold has rallied to, over the past 3 months, over 17.7%. Year to date, silver now is at 5%. In addition to, excuse me, I said that wrong. Let me repeat that. Gold in the last 3 months has gone up 17.7%, and year to date, it's up over 5%. This is mainly due to the fact that in 2020 gold demand hit an 11-year high. In 2022, central banks around the world bought the most gold since 1967, which conveniently, no conspiracy theory here, was the biggest collapse before the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was basically the last huge financial disaster that we had around the world. But that definitely couldn't happen now. I mean, it's everything's completely okay. Precious metals, particularly gold, are going to continue to see a higher price due to the fact that we have the sanction situations going on around the world. In addition to that, especially the emerging markets. I always tell you guys, don't pay attention to what they say. Pay attention to what they do. I would turn off the news. I wouldn't even turn on the TV if I were you. For example, here in Colombia, I don't have a TV, but there's certain sites that, agree with my conspiracy theories, but they don't tell us the truth. So if you pay attention to the way they behave, you can't deny the way somebody is behaving. Now, why in the world would central banks all of a sudden be so interested in gold? If there happened to be some kind of reset, financial reset, that would maybe indicate that people want gold to be able to have a bigger piece of the pie when the new financial system gets reset. But that's probably just a conspiracy. Friday, the surprisingly strong employment report caused almost everything to crash, including gold and silver. Gold went down over 3.38% to 1865. So far, gold has hit a 9-month high and silver a 4-week high. Silver for the week went down just under 6% to 22.41. And you should probably get some, because if the central banks are getting some, you should probably have some too. But don't leave it in the safety deposit box. Bury it in your property. I don't know what happened to the gold and silver offers. I must have misplaced it. These videos are good, right? With my conspiracy theory humor. There's part humor. I think most of you guys that are on my same wavelength, you guys know it's not really conspiracy theory, right? I just have to present it that way so they won't ban this channel too on YouTube. Financial and banking news. Egyptian parliament approved to agree to join the BRICS Bank. Now, if you guys don't know what's happening, I told you guys last week that there's a situation where people are starting to pivot away from the dollar. After the after the petrodollar agreement the United States made from Saudi Arabia, Arabia, everybody essentially just bought dollars because they needed oil. And then it just became customary. So if Brazil, let's say, had to pay Russia for corn or fertilizer, the custom would just be to switch into dollars, to have dollars in reserves, and then pay Russia in dollars. Now that the United States has weaponized the dollar, a lot more people want to have an alternatives. So the BRICS Bank is made by a group of countries. The BRICS term was coined, I think, 10 or 15 years ago for kind of the next world economic powers: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then South Africa, those 5 countries. So now they're starting to join together to create an alternative to the US dollar and be able to pay in other currencies and trade bilaterally instead of getting dollars. That has huge implications because the more and more people use less dollars, the more and more those dollars are going to come back home. The more and more the demand for the dollar is going to go down. Now, typical supply and demand for any product, when the demand goes down, what happens to the product? You connecting the dots? So if less people want the dollar, the demand goes down. See what I'm going with this? So what's going to happen is people are going to want less dollars, right? So the value of the dollar is going to go down because less people are ordering it or demanding it. And then all of those dollars that are from outside of the US are going to come back into the US. So the demand is going to collapse. The supply is going to explode because there's more dollars outside of the United States than in the United States. And we're literally going to turn into Venezuela. I was born there. So you guys might not know what's going on there, but check out what's going on there with the inflation. 234% last year. And you thought now it was bad. The ECB, which is the Euro Central Bank, hiked rates by 0.5% to 2.5. They signaled they're going to have one more hike the same size in March. So it's going to be probably to 3.25 to 3.5, highest since 2000. To fight inflation, obviously. Spain consumer prices are greater than expected at 5.8% year over year. And a report on Tuesday came out that in the UK, grocery price inflation hit a record at 16.7% in the 4 weeks leading to January 22. The increase 2.3% on the previous month is the highest since 2008. They're going to continue to get worse, by the way. And speaking of consumers in the United States, there was a report by TransUnion, which is one of the 3 major credit bureaus, saying that the U.S. consumer credit card debt reached a record of $931 billion in Q4 of 2022. That surged 18.5%. And then the personal savings is down to a record low at 3.4%. So people are saving a record low amount of money and they're spending a record high amount of money. What could possibly go wrong? The Treasury yield inversion is continuing as well. Remember that when people borrow, obviously the United States government issues debt, short-term, long-term. So when the interest rate on the shorter term debt increases and the longer term debt decreases, right? And there's an inversion between the two, that's an indication of a recession. In political news, the independents in the United States, which make up 40% of the United States population, could dominate American politics if they created their own political party. America during the third quarter, from the ages of 25 to 44, saw a 84% increase in mortality, meaning that 84% people died than normal. That was in the third quarter of 2021. The 2021 quarter two, the excess was 33%. And in Germany, the excess deaths were up by 276% since 2020. Now, what was the difference? You would think that because of the pandemic, we would have excess deaths in 2020 because that was the peak of the pandemic. What could be causing the deaths in 2021 and 2022? I wonder. Reports of Bank of America Global Research found that between July 2021 and July 2022, there was a record amount of people moving to Texas and Florida, the free states. And the most residents left California and New York, the communist republics of the United States. Japanese national debt is about $9.2 trillion. The Central Bank of Japan owns 50% of that debt. It's going to get to the point now where if they continue buying their own debt, they're going to own the same government entity. Well, that's not really a government entity, but the Central Bank of Japan is going to literally own all the debt of Japan. And this is going to be the same situation that we're going to have in the United States as well, where we're not going to be able to afford our own debt. So we're going to have to just, create money out of thin air and then buy our own debt. That's called monetization of the debt. And that's when the value of the dollar continues to decrease. In economic news, PayPal is the next company that's announcing that they're going to be doing layoffs. They're saying that they're going to lay off about 7%. The German economic output, or the GDP, I should say, unexpectedly shrank by Q4 by 0.2%. This was unexpected because they were expected to grow. And then in the Eurostat information, the data showed that the Eurozone avoided a recession in Q4. This was mainly, however, due to a little bit of funny business when it came to the actual reporting. So the European economy only grew by 0.1%, but if they really would have not, let's say, messed with the numbers so much, Ireland's economy grew by 3.5%. And basically Ireland, the reason why it grew so much is because all of the corporate companies that park their tax money there, so they don't have to pay taxes. So in reality, if it wasn't for Ireland and all their, let's call it drug money, the overall situation in the Eurozone would have been 0% growth. South Korea reported a 7.3% drop in the year-over-year industrial output. They are the 7th largest exporter in the world, and this is the worst annual reading since May 2020 figure. Their exports gone down by 16.6% in January. So they're not a huge economy. I think they're number 13 or 15 on the list, something like that. But they are the 7th largest exporter in the world. And that's mainly due to, Samsung Electronics, which is one of the big conglomerates in the world. They make everything from phones to chips to computer screens to actual TVs and TV screens for other people. So it's a big indicator of what's to come, right? Because this drop, the Samsung revenue, they had a 69% decline in profits, and obviously a big part of their sales is the consumer spending for their phones and all their other gadgets, right? So if they had a 69% decline in profit, which is the worst drop in 8 years, and South Korea, where they're based, is the 7th largest exporter in the world, and there was an over 16% drop in the exports, that kind of tells you what direction we're heading in overall. Number of Americans, as I mentioned in the beginning, filing new unemployment claims dropped to a 9-month low. The weekly claims dropped by 3,000. The continuing claims dropped by 11,000. And the economy actually created 223,000 jobs, which again is not a good thing for us, because that means that the Fed is going to continue to increase rates and the economy is going to have less growth as they continue to increase them. In corporate news, Apple reported the first profit miss in 2016. So you can see it's not only Samsung. Twitter applies for a regulatory license to enter into the payments business. If you guys didn't know, Elon Musk, he wants to convert Twitter into what's called WeChat, which is kind of the main app that everybody uses in China. Everything from calling a taxi to paying your taxi to ordering a taxi to chatting on the phone to making payments. And so that's basically the direction that Twitter is headed in. Shares of Tesla went down over 6% after surging 33% last week in its best weekly performance since 2013. There's a JP Morgan, if you remember, Chase is the biggest bank in the United States by assets. There's an analyst there named Ryan Brinkman that says that Tesla went up too fast, too quickly. And there's a lot of uncertainties around the EV market, including the situation with the macro environment, the high inflation and high interest rates. But they did increase their sales by 18% in December, especially from their China factory. But they are continuing to face a lot of increased pressure from competitors, GM, Ford in the US, and also BYD in China, which BYD, I think it stands for Beyond Your Dreams, is the largest electric vehicle manufacturer in the world. Nvidia fell by over 5% on Monday. Their post-Intel rally fizzled out. This, again, has to do with the situation with the economy. If people aren't buying stuff, that means that they're going to make a lot less graphic cards for everything, right? Even they were having a huge boom because of the crypto space, because of all the mining machines. People aren't buying mining machines anymore. GM rose over 8% on Tuesday after they reported a profit that jumped in Q4. The revenue came above expectations of over $3 billion. So they increased the expectation. And for the 4 year, they had over $14 billion in profit, which was near the high end of its forecast. Meta Platforms, which is the owner of Facebook, went up by over 23% after they beat on Q4 revenue as well, which looks like it was about $500 million or so. But more importantly, they announced a $40 billion stock buyback. So it's okay to let go all the employees, but they got money to go do a stock buyback. See how that works? And obviously, a lot of the executives get paid in stock compensation. So if they do the buyback, the stock will go up, and then what they get paid is a lot higher. And Ford Motors fell by over 7% due to the supply chain issues that hurt the bottom line. They told analysts they expected to make about 11.5 to 12.5 billion. They only earned 10.4, and a dramatic stock market meltdown for Indian-based Adani Group shares. The Adani Group, there's a situation. This is the largest, richest man in India. He went from the richest man in Asia was the third richest man in the world. Now he's 10th after there was a huge collapse of all of their stocks. It's a 60-year-old named Gautam Adani, and supposedly there was an investor in the United States that wrote a scathing report about how it's a huge, fraudulent corporate scheme, which obviously they deny. Trade news, the U.S. Agricultural Secretary Tom Vilsack on Monday that they're not going to have any compromises about the exporting of GMO corn to Mexico. The president of Mexico, Obrador, issued a decree back in 2020 to ban GMO corn starting in January 2024. But now there's a situation where Mexico can't find enough corn that they need for their tortillas. So now they're going to lax in some of those rules to be able to import that GMO corn. Mexico is the second largest importer of corn in the world for the tortillas way. And they're over 90% of U.S. corn in the U.S. is genetically modified. In technology, I thought this was pretty cool. Colossal, which was a biotech firm, is actively working to reincarnate the long-dead woolly mammoth in order to make its return by extinction in 2027. They just got another $60 million in funding. And the idea is to return it to the Arctic ecosystem where it used to live before. They also want to be able to bring back Australia's Tasmanian tiger, the Mauritius dodo bird. Mauritius is an island off to the right of Africa, and the North American passenger pigeon that they want to de-extinct. Fastest growing social media firm in the world, ChatGPT, is now charging $20 for a premium version. They have over 100 million users in the last 2 months, and U.S. schools are now moving to ban the app because now people don't have to do their homework. They can just tell ChatGPT to do it. And investment news, the U.S. Treasury is making the tax credit for the electric vehicles from Tesla, Ford, GM, and Volkswagen a little bit better. Now you can get the $7,500 credit if an SUV is valued below $80K and cars and sedans below $55K. And in international events, U.S. officials said Thursday, Chinese spy balloon was registered over Montana. The military suggested Biden not shoot it down because it could be a danger to pedestrians and people in the area. Now it's starting to go towards the Atlantic Ocean, and supposedly they're going to go ahead and shoot it down. Northeast temperatures broke the low readings dip. It was negative 30 to 50 below zero. In centigrade, that's negative 10. So much for global warming. And unusual facts this week, there's a whole nother... I don't know if you guys have noticed, I told you guys this in the video in 2020, that what I think is going to start happening is we're going to start seeing extremes in weather. Not it's going to get really warm or really cold, but notice we've had a super warm winter overall, Europe too, and now we all of a sudden have these Arctic blasts that are just freezing everything. Have you guys noticed how weird that is? Preppers were right. So let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. Sorry for the technical issues, and we'll see you next week. Don't forget, the preppers were right.